Hey guys, welcome back. So before we move to strings, I want to consider a few edge cases when working with integers and doubles that are essential to know. So consider a simple example. Int a is equal to 2 and int b is equal to 3. Suppose that we decided that we wanted to store the result of a divided by b. Okay, well a divided by b, we know that a is 2, we know that b is 3. So 2 divided by 3, that's going to give us 2 divided by 3 we can just write it like this, is going to give us 0.666. Okay, cool. But remember, in our previous rules, we weren't actually able to store numbers with stuff following the decimal point inside of an integer. So why are we allowed to do this? Well, it turns out that when we have something like this, when we have 0.6666, and we're just dividing an integer by another integer, Java is just going to take the stuff following the decimal point, so it's going to take this 0.6666 and it's just gonna trim it out. So we're just going to be left with 0. So this might be a little counterintuitive, but because we're working with strings, just remember that you can't have anything following the decimal point. And just to prove it, indeed we do have 0. Okay, fine. But suppose now we did b divided by a. Okay, so b is 3 and a is 2. So then we would get 1.5. Now remember, we can't keep anything after the decimal point, so we're just going to be left with 1. And so now let's print it out. And indeed, we are left with 1. Good. Okay, so let's comment this out. Now let's say that we're working with doubles and integers. Let's just intermix the two. So let's say that int f is equal to 20 and double d is equal to 22. Oops, I guess we've already defined d, right? So let's define it as r. Alright, so let's create a simple test. Result is equal to r plus f divided by, so f is an integer, r is a double. Let's keep it a little simpler. So f divided by r. Okay, so what's going on here? R is a double with value 20. So what we're really doing is we're doing 20 divided by 22. And so offhand, I don't know, what is that number? That's 1 over 20 divided by 22. It's like 0.909. 0.909. Right? So according to these rules, right? Remember, ideally we would just cut off the stuff following the decimal point and we would be left with 0. But unfortunately, we get this compiler error. So why do we get that? And it's because we're working with this double right here. The number we're dividing by is a double. So when we're intermixing with a double and an integer, stuff becomes a little more complicated because you kind of have to worry about the precision now. Now Java can't just say, oh, let me just get rid of this 0.909, right? It doesn't really look at this. So it just doesn't really know to get rid of the stuff following the decimal point when we're intermixing it with a double. So what can we do? Well, the first thing we can do is we can apply the cast operation that we had defined before. So what is going to happen? Well, now it's exactly as we would expect, right? So you take 20, you divide by 22, you get 0.909, then you cast it to an integer, which means you just get rid of the stuff following the decimal point, and you're left with 0. Cool. And then if we were to print this out, println result, we see that we get 0. We see that we get 0. Okay, so now let's invert it. Suppose we had this. F divided by r. So now we're storing the result inside of a double. So f is now 20 and r is 22. So we're left with 0.909. But, this is key, instead of trimming the stuff after the decimal point, we're actually going to keep it because we're storing the result inside of a double. So this might seem a little confusing, but remember, doubles have the capacity, or they have the ability, to store stuff after the decimal point. So when we're dividing an integer by a double, the result is going to be a double, and that's why we can store it inside of a double. But when we divide an integer by a double, we're not able to store it inside of an integer because the result is actually a double. Okay. Okay, so that's the grand takeaway from this video. I'll see you guys in the next lecture where we're going to start discussing strings.